Welcome back to another Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, we are finishing up with the Sorcerer Kings for now, but we're going to finish going through the rest of their units. Now, this should be a reasonably short episode, and anytime I say that, it's always the longest stuff. But this time, we're only going to look at 3 units. The way I've been looking through the units for Sorcerer Kings, remember, this is from Conquest Last Army of Kings from Parabellum Games. This is the brand new faction that's coming out as of recording in about 2.5, 3 weeks with some of the units that we're talking about now. Not entirely sure. I will put this, I'm recording this on Tuesday, the 19th. I want to say it's either this Thursday or maybe it's the next Thursday, I forget which, that Parabellum Games is doing one of their discussions that they do. Essentially, they put it on Twitch as well as on like Google Chats and things like that. And they talk with the fans, and they're going to be talking about, I want to say it's like March through May or a little bit later, some of the reveals and the things that are coming out. So we might see some of those things pop then. But the way I've been doing this is I started with characters, then I went through what's in the starter box, because that's the first thing you're going to have in your hands. Then I went through what is the rest of the stuff coming out in April, and these are the rest of the units that we know of that we're not currently sure when it's going to be released. You'll probably be seeing this video on Thursday, which means by the point that you watch this, you might already know when they're dropping. But we know they're not dropping, at least for a little bit. So keep in mind, if you are trying to pick up any Conquest stuff, that we do have a discount code put below for you. You can use that to save yourself 10%. Helps out the show as well. Helps us pay all the different bills related to podcasting, YouTube, all of that. Helps us be able to upgrade equipment and everything else that we do and try to and want to be able to do. Is that part of it is to be able to also help us upgrade our equipment for battle reports and all. We're trying to get back to doing more of that. I've been wanting to. I have a store where I can do it at. I also want to be able to do it at another store, be able to do it more at Dan's house, and just upgrade some of the pieces we have around so we can get better quality out, especially for the style that I like doing them. So if you are looking to save, the code is Train Kickers. Said link below. You can click on that. You can go in there, save yourself 10% on this or anything else that you're trying to pick up. I myself keep going back and forth on what I'm getting next. Probably this, although I know there's several people in my area going to pick it up. But I haven't fully decided. I do think that's what I'm going with. So, as I said, we only have 3 units to go through, though some of them might take a little longer than others, but we'll get to those now. All right, we'll start from the top. So we're going to talk about the archers. Now, one thing you'll notice between this and if you look at the rule book, they actually are named different. These are the disciples there. They're called archers. I believe the first part of the name is different as well, but they're the same exact unit. So and I believe, if memory serves, everything is identical except for the points. Oh, sorry, except for the name. Yeah, they're the Dhanur Disciples. My apologies. They're named the same. I always call them just the archers. I thought they actually were worded differently. That might have been an update. I think they actually were they were something else before. They updated the name. I'm not going crazy, at least not for this. All right, 140 points for 3 stands. They are move 6 with a volley of 2 for an archer unit. That's okay. It's a little bit low, but you don't want anything having too high of volley characteristics. 1 clash, they're archers. They're not meant to be in combat. 4 attacks, 4 wounds, 3 resolve, 2 defense, no evade. Get into combat with them, and they are just evaporating in general. Now, for the things that they do, they are Barrage 5 at 20-inch range, and they do have arcing fire. Pause briefly there to check something. Those are marksman clone numbers. It's 2 inches less, but otherwise, they're essentially the same way you get marksman clones, and marksman clones are a little bit more expensive. So, for anyone who's not aware of arcing fire, just to make sure we go over exactly what this does, because this might not be something your army does. When you take until the end of the regiment activation, if you have the aimed shot special rule and is not currently occupying in a piece of garrison terrain, so aimed shot gives you the +1 to volley. So if you took aim and then want to shoot at someone, if you're willing to take a -1 to your volley, so essentially +1, -1, you're back to 2s, you can shoot anything that's within range. You don't actually have to have line of sight or anything like that. As it says, it may select an enemy regiment its front arc within the barrage range of at least one of its stands and within line of sight of a friendly regiment, so someone else has to see them. Now, the reason why your archers usually don't shoot is because someone is in front of you or is poorly positioned, therefore you don't get to see them. As long as any of your units see them, you may shoot at them. If they're within a piece of obscuring terrain, then the barrage special rules have, that's normal, so obscuring still works the same way it always has. If they're not all in, then you don't take the penalty. So they have to be entirely in or not. So arcing fire means in those spots, because what often happens, your archers move up, you have another combat unit, and especially if you're going a long ways. The last time I played Spires, I was going a long ways. And with that, the problem is my archers only have so much space because there's only a very small window where I can go. And my combat units want to push in front, but then they're usually blocking off the archers because my opponent is a little bit thinner coming down. I don't have those sort of targets. So arcing fire for the first 2 turns when I'm shooting. And then my units start pushing forward, and then I start having some line of sight, and all I can do that. Now, if you're long ways, it's a little bit easier, but this does mean if you're worried about some of your archer units, if you need to, the enemy is pushing a little too fast on you, put your combat unit right in front. Put the thing that they can't get past right in front, you'll still be able to shoot. Yeah, you won't hit on quite as good, but with 20-inch range, you have the ability to do the aim a lot more often, because again, after a move, so do a normal move of 6, 20-inch shot, 26, you're hitting halfway up the board if you're playing along deploy along the long table edge. If you're already up half the board, your opponent's going to be pulling forward, you're in good range. If not, if you're not shooting that first turn you cone on, you can double move, be up 12, now you're looking at 32. Now you're hitting pretty much anything that you want. Yes, you're not hitting entirely to their backfield, but you're looking at your opponent as they pull forward. Or if you need to, next round you do one more move, take a shot into someone. That way you can hit pretty much anywhere now on the field that you want. They're not hiding from you anymore. Or a little bit easier if, say, you're coming in from a side or a flank. But 20-inch range is actually very long. 5 shots, 6 on the leader stand is a lot of shots. Yeah, you don't have any minuses, but that's fine. You have arcing fire. I can just shoot you even if I can't see you, as long as someone sees you. And on these boards, it's pretty easy for someone to have line of sight, someone in your army. Remember, especially if you have someone come in from a flank, now they pretty much see most of the opponent unless someone's right there. So you'll have those shots. You have a standard bearer as well. If for some reason you wanted to use the unstoppable, you shouldn't be charging unless you absolutely have to. 40 points extra a stand, that's very, very cheap. So you could keep these guys at 140, keep them nice and cheap, keep them as a backfield holder, keep them as a downrange harasser. Again, they're not going to be killing out units, but they could be popping a stand or so off. And if your opponent has one or less stands, you either could potentially break them, or 2, lower enough that they're no longer take the objective because your unit pushed forward. For options, buffs, and things like that, obviously a Sorcerer is a nice fit because your Sorcerer is another ranged unit, although shorter range. Other options to buff them, the Maharaj does have in a Court of Air. Homing wins, you have to be within 12 inches, scaling, but that's fine. I'm not worried on your own 7 dice looking for 3s. Target friendly regiment, rerolls fail to hit when performing volley. So you're on 2s, potentially on 3s, re-rolling. Let's say for a moment you're a unit of 4. So you're firing 21 shots. Let's say you were able to aim. Let's assume for a second that you didn't have to use volley fire. All right, so you're on 3s re-rolling. So you're looking at 15, maybe 16 hits. I'm not too worried what my opponent's save is. Even on a pretty good save, even if they're saving half, they're taking about 7 or so wounds. Maybe you spike a little bit more. Maybe they essentially spike a little less. You could be potentially taking off 2 to 3 stands. If you spike very hard, you can take off 2 to 3 stands. Otherwise, you take off 1 to maybe 2 stands. Especially if there's someone who's a little bit hardier, a 6 wound sort stand, now you're popping off a stand. That's quite a bit, especially if you're getting those rerolls. If you do have to end up using the arcing fire, well, now at least you're on 2s rerolling, so now you're going to be much more likely to at least get closer to that on those 20 shots, 10 or so hits, which, if it's the unit they're trying to block with, their archer unit and all, tend to be a lot less wounds, tend to not be nearly as defensive. Excuse me. You can really start putting some damage down. So, the Maharaj, if you're running Court of Air, has a great upgrade for them. Sorcerer, like I said, your characters need somewhere to go. Currently, your characters can only go on the Rajakur, because that's all you have for options. When these archers come out, that's where my Sorcerer is going to go, because that's another shooting unit. That way they can all kind of sit back, shoot. Arcane Conduit, I want to sit on that objective, get those extra ritual markers. Spells don't really help them that much overall, but that's fine. Well, if you're going with fire, if you put it on yourself to help grab the objectives or a death, that's something, but I'm not too worried about that. The one spell that would help is the Searing Sandstorm. So -1 to your enemy's defense. And if you are if they're in contact with someone who is born of air, -1 to their evade. Pretty good because you have arcing fire. You don't actually have to have line of sight. So you could cast this onto an enemy unit, lower their defense, then shoot in. Much better chances of getting something through. And anyone else who's going at them as well. So you can soften them up, which is enough space for your Digins or your Efreet to get in there and kind of clean house. Ritual-wise, I don't think any of the rituals really do that much for them. You don't want any of that. Intrusive thoughts, no. You don't really want someone coming at you. Farsight, maybe, but a lot of the rituals don't help as much. They're base pretty good. Also going through the masteries, I've went through them quite a few times in Patrons Gifts. I don't think any of them really do that much for them. This is one of the units that doesn't have Elemental, so that means the Sidar's bonus, just for anyone who hasn't watched all these other videos, it is, no, sorry, not Fear and Discipline, it's Word of the Voice. It does give them Unyielding, because it works on anyone who is, oh, sorry, no, that you have to be in that unit. My apologies. I have the virtual command card. Oh, sorry, it's if you dealt at, what is it, Fear and Discipline? Yep, there it is. Sorry, it was Fear and Discipline. My apologies. I knew it was one of the 2 rules. You don't have Elemental, so you have 2 more stands on your leader. Your little 3-pack is now 5. Your 4-pack now counts for extra. I like the idea of running a 4-pack with my Sorcerer. 3, as I said, 3 if I have to keep it cheap. But for archery units, I like to get that 1 extra because then they actually get some output. Since you're not going to do resolves anyway on any of this, you want a little bit more in terms of stands. But even if you do 3, you can count as 5 if you happen to have a Sidar on your list. That's enough to keep your objectives. We talked before about the Rajakur wanting to be sort of backfield for now. Once these guys come out, I can see a Rajakur pushing a little bit more towards the middle. So maybe they'll be of your center board holders. These guys now are your backfield objective holders. Or if there's an objective to destroy on the board, they can fire into that objective. All right, that's all I have to say about the archers. I always like archers. I think archers are very good. Anything that's matching reasonably close to marksman clones is quite good, and can't complain about that. This list needs some shooting. Since your spells don't tend to be offensive in the same sort of way, you have some damaging spells, but at least when I look at some other factions, they can do good amounts of damage through spells. I don't see that quite as much. You're a lot more of utility bag. I want something that can hit some range. All right, so we're going to talk about now is the Mahut. Now, as far as I know, I haven't seen a picture of this thing. It's got to be an elephant. So Mahut were elephant riders, essentially. That's who the Mahut are. Araka's looking at talked about essentially they're a group of individuals who are kind of, I guess, dying out. I don't know if that's true. I don't want to speak on too much of that, but they're the riders. So my guess, and maybe we have seen this and I'm not aware of, my guess is an elephant with a howdah on top. So for the Mahut, this is another heavy monster, much like the Rajakar. The Rakshasa. My apologies, Rakshasa. 240 points. You're on move 6. Pretty good for that. Volley 2, Clash 2, you do ranged and close combat, so stats are a little bit low, but you have some ways to up those, obviously. 10 attacks on 20 wounds, so it has a very heavy wound total. Resolve 3 with 3 defense, and it doesn't evade. It's a giant elephant. It does have a barrage 10, 20-inch range that it can fire, and it does get a free volley action. You can shoot someone you're in combat with, but obviously if you're in combat with someone, you have to shoot the one you're in combat with, because anyone who's allowed to shoot in combat, the other big monsters, say the city-states ones, have the same sort of thing. Sorry, is it the city-states or no, the Nords? I think it's the Nords one that does. And you cannot do more than 1 volley. That's fine. You get an extra shot. This thing gets 5 impact hits with Brutal Impact 2, so -2 to their saves. You're going to get some damage in. It has Line Breaker with Cleave 1. So remember, Line Breaker removes your shields as well as your Bastion. So you do not get those special rules. And that's in Clash and Impact. So if you were a defense 2 with a shield, say Bastion type unit, you're now back down to 2s. Cleave 1, now you're down to 1s. So unless someone has a very good evade, or just, Dweg, defense 3/4 with hardened, if you don't have those sort of rules, you're probably on 2s or maybe even 1s against this guy. He doesn't have the most attacks, but he does have a way to get through quality numbers. Partly is his impact, the fact he has brutal impact, which helps, his line breaker with his cleave, the fact he gets a free barrage just to make you roll dice and fail results. He has Oblivious, so him going away from resolves is much harder. Remember, Oblivious means you need 2 wounds through resolve test to take 1 wound on your actual model. It is, I believe, rounded up. Okay. And you have Trample 5. For anyone who doesn't play against Wadroom, for Trample, at the end of your activation, the opponent takes that many hits. You're Trample 5, so the opponent takes 5 hits. They're hit automatically. You don't get any of your special rules. You don't get any of your character special rules, anything like that. And you can use this to inflict wounds on objective markers. If this regiment was performing as if this regiment was performing a clash against it. So you can use it to hurt objectives. So, I want to talk about the objective part first. Remember, this thing is a heavy, so it's allowed to do 2 wounds with an action. That means it could charge in, have its impacts cause a wound, have its clash cause a wound, or potentially 2. And if not, at the very end, Trample could. Now, Trample says as if it was performing a clash, you're only allowed to get up to 2 wounds through clash. So I'm curious, if you did 2 wounds in a clash, could you do an extra wound in a trample? I'm not entirely sure personally. I don't know if there's been a good ruling for that. All right, taking a quick look, it seems like the belief is that even though it says as if, that's just trying to clarify the fact that you can hurt objectives, because there was various things you couldn't do objectives for, like spells no longer hurt objectives. So I would, me personally, when I run a tournament in a little bit, I would rule that yes, Trample can, but if I can attend that thing on that Thursday, I might try to ask in the group, when Parabellum is talking, just to get definitive on that, because I haven't seen anything definitive. To me, it makes sense, but I always want things to be without argument. All right. So for the Mahut, a few things we want to be able to say about it. 1, there's only 1 model that can ride it, and that's the Majahar. So the Maharaja, I think that's how it's said. I looked at it before, but every time I know I say a little bit different. I'll have it down in pad at some point. That is the 1 model that's allowed to ride it, because if we look under the masteries, it is a combat mastery. Lord of all they see. The Maharaja can go on top of this, gains rider, and if you're in range of objective zone, you gain terrifying as well. Now the problem is you're only around 1 mastery, which means if you're going to pop someone on top, you can't get all the other good bonuses that you may want to, and therefore they don't apply because you're not allowed to take any of them anyway. So I do like that. I do like the idea of the Maharaja on top, but I do like that. But the Maharaj, the problem would be if he's on top. I'm probably still going to do this. I'm curious size-wise. Is this going to be, closer to normal monsters, or are they going to go crazy giant dinosaur on this thing? But your Maharaj on top just doesn't get the other good mastery bonuses that you may want. So then you look at patron gifts, can take 2, not allowed to take banners because you have to be infantry banners. And if you're on a monster, you're no longer an infantry. At least that's the way that Riders always worded itself. Giving them blessed. I mean, you want someone to have that anyway because you want more ritual markers. So that's not so bad. Remember when you're saying like your Maharaj is on a unit, this is true for your Sorcerer as well as your Raj, that they gain the type that they are, which means if he's taking, say, fire spell, Court of Fire, then you count as Born of Flame and you will get the rerolls. So you can get rerolls in either direction if you want to take that as a bonus. It doesn't give them elemental, so that's not going to help you. Although that's not a bad thing either for your other elemental units. This is probably your most survivable way to get your Maharaj up there. So that way, if you do want them further up the board to be able to support your other elementals, this is a great way to be able to do that. The other ones are fine, but in terms of do they help the Mahut, not really. For other rules, any spells that really help, not too much, because you're not going to get some of the other bonuses. Notice it doesn't have Unstoppable. Oh, but you have to be elemental to get that bonus or to remove it. I think that's what the Sorcerer was. Air? The reform doesn't matter. Oh no, you can just give Unstoppable. Okay, my apologies. Yeah, Tailwind, give it Unstoppable. That's pretty good because now you can actually make sure you get in, because this is a model that you want in. You want to be charging because you are impacting, fighting, trampling. So you can cut down a lot of things with that. I think it's the other one, the one that removes Bloodlust and gives Unstoppable, that you need for that. But I don't remember who had that, because there's a lot of spells and they're very, very different who has which ones. And I'm not yet comfortable remembering who exactly is what. Lifting Winds, adding 2 to their first march could be helpful, get you further up the board. No, not worried about lightning bolts. The volley, again, homing missiles can help, or sorry, homing winds for your missile type attacks would help. For the Raj, I know someone has a spell that does this. No, it was it was a draw event. That's what it was. It was, I believe, a mastery. Sorry, it was a patron gift. I finally found it. It was a patron gift, but it only does work on elementals. So there is a spell to be able to get you unstoppable, so at least you can get some rerolls there. But overall, honestly, I really, really do like the Mahut. I do think my Maharaj, I probably would run one on it just to kind of get a feel for it, see if I like it or not. I am a little disappointed in I can't take additional masteries with that. Although I still do like it. Even if not, what I might do if I was ever running a 2 Maharaj list, my non-warlord probably maybe goes on this one, whichever school I want, and then the other one gets the other court, depending on which one feels a little bit better. The one that takes the other court takes the other masteries that are going to buff its own unit or heal that unit back. Remember, one of them heals your unit, and then your spell that you're casting onto someone else can heal that unit, so you can get some double healing in. This army has some nice subtle ways to get some decent healing out. And anytime you can bring back even a single stand of something that is brute, or your infantry will just, that way they don't go away. But your brutes, since that's really what you are, your brutes or maybe monsters to stick out that extra round because you have a few extra wounds, is huge. I'm really looking forward to this model. Of the ones that are out yet, this is probably my second one that I want. The archers I want the most, just because I want a different option that's just pure Rajakar. So that's the Mahut. All right, last unit we're going to talk about is the Trinavarta. So I did do a little bit of looking up what some of these different things were. I'm not going to go through all of them because, one, I haven't read enough to get it right. But this is essentially, as I read it, when you go through Bhagavad Gita and all of those, there's a lot of these ideas of you are a combination of good and bad, and some things become more good and some things are more bad and all of that. So this belongs to a class of demigods, I want to say, that are a little bit usually more considered on the evil end than the good end. The Trinavarta specifically was created to destroy one of the other demigods, but it was destroyed by it and all of that. Or maybe gods. I'm not sure exactly where they class all those things. Like I said, I looked a little bit, but I don't want to get too far into it. So it is essentially like a whirling tornado almost. And that's what we see here. At least that's how I interpret it here. If that's the way it's actually supposed to be interpreted, I'm not entirely sure. So this is a medium monster. A lot of the other monsters that we've looked at, the Rakshasa, have been heavy, and well as the Mahut. So this is your medium. This is your earlier game monster. 220 points, a little bit cheaper than some of the others. Move 7's a little bit faster. Volley and Clash 3, so better stat-wise there because this thing is going in close combat as well as shooting. 10 attacks, the same way as Assault, 16 wounds. 3 resolve, 3 defense, but actually has 2 evade. Makes sense. It's a bunch of fast-moving wind and all of those sort of things. Now, 16-inch range with 12 shots. Again, on Volley 3, I like that a lot more because you're just going to get more hits through. Has the same exact rule. It gets a free volley. If you're in combat with someone, you may volley onto them. However, it gets a nice addition for that. It gets dead shots. Dead shots means you always count as if you had aimed. So you don't actually have to aim with this thing. You're automatically going to be counting as aiming, so you're automatically going to be on 4s. So you're actually hitting pretty well. You're hitting 2/3 of the time. With 12 shots, 2/3 now, we're taking a look at 8, so you're probably looking at 7 to 9 on average that you're going to get. That's enough to be able to put maybe a stand down on a weaker unit, or at least put a good amount of wounds on something for either when you go in or when someone else goes in. Remember, since it gets this free, you could shoot in, charge, then assault. So it is Born of Air. Remember, Born of Air just means that if you get targeted with an air spell, hey, heal 2 wounds. Elemental. So if the card right before you that went was a ritual card in the card stack, then you get an extra action. You may still only shoot once, but you could potentially move, shoot, charge, assault. And since you always count as aimed, you don't care about aiming. Loose formation, so it counts as obscured essentially, so you're having your barrage against it. And it does the same thing when they inflict impact. Again, it's essentially a swirling tornado. It has Whirling Storm. While within range of an objective zone, when the trinavarta performs a volley action, it may instead perform a volley action against all enemy regiments within range of the same objective zone. So, if the opponent, as I read it here, all right, so took a pause there to read a few things. So, Whirling Storm, what it means. When you're within range of an objective zone and you decide to do a volley action, you instead can volley against everyone that's there. All the opponents that are within range of that objective zone. You use your full barrage against every one of them, and all hits are considered simultaneous. That only counts as one action. So if you're on objective and the opponent has several things on objective, you can hit everything on that objective. Easy enough to get line of sight because how big you are. You're a medium monster. So you should be able to see most things. You can hit most things. So you'll be able to do, realistically, quite a bit of damage to this sort of stuff. So there is ways to buff this. Remember, we already looked at a spell that lets you reroll misses. You're looking at 4s, rerolling. So now you're hitting almost all of your shots again. 12 shots in this case. If you're on the 4s, you're getting realistically 10 or so hits. You have no other bonuses to it. But again, if they're not heavily armored, especially if you're going against infantry, sort of the things that maybe this thing wants to hunt down, very good shot against it. What you don't have, let's get into Ice Storm actually, my apologies, we did miss one more. This is another when you get destroyed thing. Upon it being destroyed, enemy regiments within the same zone as the objective zone this regiment is within range of cannot benefit from the Inspired Special rule. So when it goes down, if you're on objective, every enemy on that objective can't get inspired. This thing can fight in combat. Clash 3 isn't bad, 10 attacks. The big thing, it has no combat bonus. It doesn't impact. It doesn't have cleave. It doesn't have terrifying naturally. There is ways to get it because it is elemental, but you're missing a lot of those little pieces. So you are looking a lot more in terms of a shooting unit, or at least you can move, say double move, hit them with something, double move to get onto an objective, shoot a bunch of the units that are there, soften them up, then maybe go in for a charge depending on that. If you happen to have your elemental bonus, so if you were able to have a card go off right before this one of your rituals, then you could, move, shoot, charge, assault. If you're choosing the right targets, that absolutely could take them down. Again, it's not bad in close combat. That's just not its best thing. And even then, hey, it still gets to shoot in contact if it's in contact with an enemy, so that's okay. You could still charge in just to make sure the opponent doesn't get their bonuses, especially if you're going at something like horses under a wedge type formation or something like that. A good impact cavalry list. When I think of my cataphracti, you don't want to see this thing because once we get stuck in, yeah, we have a good defense, but our output is garbage at that point. And you can volley into us, hit into us, you'll get some wounds down. For buffs, they said the biggest one is getting to reroll your hits. There is ways that you can give it the unstoppable if you want. Those are sort of the biggest buffs as I see it, at least. A lot of your other pieces, since this is elemental, the other pieces we talked about that help elementals would help this thing as well. You have, through different masteries or patron gifts, way to be able to heal extra on elementals. 16 wounds is worth being able to get some extra heals out. I don't know if much else is that good. Remember, if you're getting a spell cast on you, you get some bonuses as well. Yeah, Tailwind is useful. For Sorcerer, do they do anything particular? That doesn't help at all. Using Searing Sandstorm, lowering someone's defense. So now they're on a lower defense. Now your good amount of shots between this, maybe your Mahut, maybe your archers, all those sort of shooting units, that don't have a lot of bonuses to the shot, but just have good amounts of shots or good results on those shots. Now you get a good bit extra. Not being able to heal units is obviously big. You're starting probably with the Raj. Raj's stuff was all on itself, so that's not doing anything. Some of the rituals can be helpful as well, or some of these upgrades. The Maharaj, spell wise, nothing too crazy. And its abilities are very good, but I'm thinking about things that directly influence beyond homing winds. Not quite as much. I'm sure there is options out there that I either haven't thought about or will show up in time. I'm not someone who runs too heavy on certain things. I'll do my spells, but I don't run super heavy on upgrades illusion originally because I'd rather get a few more units, get a feel for those units, and then start upgrading from there. So that's how I see the Trinavarta. I'm not going to do it today because I have some other things I'm doing. We're going to keep this one a bit shorter, but I am going to do at some point a just overall list build. I want to wait until what they say of when these other units are going to drop, because I don't want to say, hey, here's the overall list that I really like the look of. Oh, and it's going to be like 6 months before you get your next unit. I don't think that's true, or at least I'd like to think that's not true. But if that's the case, I don't want to be looking at list building for things that you might not have for a while. Having said that, though, you're playing for fun. Proxy everything. Proxy different things. Try them out. Get some bases. If you have an FDM printer, there's tons of files. I've printed just the size of the base. I run the bases. I run that. I'll put a GW model in it for the moment so I can count as for what the thing is to get a feel for that. So you can absolutely do those sorts of things. That's something I do quite a lot of. I will also 3D print random models. Again, I don't use them in tournaments. Not allowed to. Wouldn't do it anyway. I want to support this company. But I'll use it for testing stuff out. I do that for my Old Dominion for models that aren't released yet, so I can get a feel for them so that way I can talk about them intelligently. For all these Sorcerer Kings, so at this point we've talked everything Sorcerer Kings over the course of like 5 episodes. I will be returning to them once I and other people I know and all that get games in with them, because I think you learn best from when you actually try them. And you don't want to run into that schoolyard, well, my thing does this, and that's why it's great. Well, if you do this, I'll do that back. And that I find a lot of conversations, not always, but a lot of conversations devolve into that. Like, we can talk about all the great things that you could put on this thing. Hey, homing wins. I have all these extra rules. Oh, yeah, but my unit that I'm going to have has really good defense. So I'm not really worried about that because I'm on like defense 4. Yeah, if you're defense 4, you're probably not worried. Oh, but I'll shoot this other unit. Yeah, but they're not going to be near you, and I'll get the charge on you because I'm more mobile. Or all those sort of arguments that can happen. I find you learn best when you take something to the field, when you try it out, and you see what performed, what didn't. Keeping in mind that a bad performance doesn't mean a unit is bad, and a good performance doesn't mean it's good. You have to think about critically what were the spots you were in. Were you in an advantageous position against something that was very weak, and therefore you did well because you would have done well no matter what? Or did you do poorly because they were able to hit you and there was a bad target? Oh, you got hit by some 100 Kingdoms heavy cav. Yeah, this thing's not going to stand up to the heavy cav at all. Does heavy cav have good saves? They get into it. They have a good amount of brutal impact, good amount of impact hits. They're going to carve it up. That doesn't mean it was a bad unit, though. That just meant it had a bad target that was into, or it got hit by a bad target. So I want to get them to the board first. Now, what I will say for anyone who is interested in this, please let me know in the comments below what sort of lists are you building? What are you excited about for this faction? Are you not excited? What are you now, if you're playing something else, what are you doing against these guys? Do you have any thoughts of if your lists that you like to run are going to change? Because this is going to be the new hot army. Let's face it, in about 2 months from now, giving people a little bit of time to build stuff, in about 2 months from now, I think you're going to see a lot of Sorcerer Kings out there. I think they're going to be very, very popular. 1, they're new, and people always love the new. 2, they feel pretty strong. I don't think they're overpowered, at least not yet. Maybe things will shape out otherwise. I don't feel they're overpowered, and I think they have a very steep learning curve. I think picking which ritual, when to do them, when to put them in the stack, is going to be one of the harder things you have to focus on. When you think of the special rules in the game and like the distinguishing characteristics of the factions, I think Wadrun, because they had to figure out when to stack for different chance and who's getting them go off, is a big learning curve. They're a more difficult faction. I think these guys are one of the more difficult factions, because which rituals are you doing? Are you putting out a new ritual, or are you just stacking up more ritual markers on a previous ritual that someone did? Are you trying to time units, and when they do things, where do those rituals go? If I'm going to make you not have your 2 draw events as my opponent, where do I put that card in the stack? Because when are you really making the units go that I really want that on? All those sort of thoughts come in, and I think there's a big mini game here. And I feel that mini game, if you do it poorly, you absolutely can lower your chances of winning large. Maybe once we have them in hand and played them a bit, I will do an episode about how best to do your rituals to time them well and what to look for versus different armies and discussions like that. So I do want to do that. If anyone's had other particular discussions, put it down below, put it in the comments. Let me know the sorts of things that you want to hear about. Especially for this, if you want some other opinions, hopefully I'll get the other guys on for some other stuff. But I record this when it doesn't work for them. It's like literally the middle of the day, so I'm recording now because I have time free, so why not? But leave us any comments of anything that you want us to know, anything you want us to cover, anything like that. If you're looking to pick up any Conquest, like I said, we do have in the show notes below our codes, Terrain Kickers. We have a link below. Click on that. Save yourself some money. Helps us out as well. We greatly appreciate everyone who does use that. I do want to emphasize that anyone who supports us in any of the ways you do, even if you're just leaving comments and likes, all of that is support. We really greatly appreciate all that, because all that helps us in one way or another, either indirectly through YouTube algorithms and all of that sort of game you have to play, or very directly with us being able to keep this show running and keep this channel going. So, all right. That is enough for Sorcerer Kings for now. Next videos you should see, I should be getting back to my why you should play a faction. Next one I was doing was 100 Kingdoms, but I went to all this first. So I'll be getting back to those. Hopefully get a couple of those out next week, try to finish that out, and then get back to unit reviews for some of these other bits. All right, well, that's plenty enough said over the last few days. On behalf of everyone at the show, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.